The 2006 Winter Olympics, American snowboarder Lindsey Jacobellis was the best in the world. She was competing for gold in the snowboard cross. Snowboard cross is like dirt bike racing, but on snowboards. They start at the top of the hill and they go down. It can be pretty chaotic. But she was the absolute best in the world, but she hadn't gotten a gold medal yet. So in the gold medal race in 2006, she jumped out to a huge lead. As luck would have it, two of the other competitors in the snowboard cross crashed in the first couple of turns. And so it's just her and one other snowboarder left. And it was her and a huge gap and Tanya Friedman of Switzerland. Lindsey was about to win her first gold medal ever. Now, on her second to the last jump, she could feel the excitement and she decided to celebrate early. So she threw a little flashy, unnecessary trick in the air, and upon landing, if you want to call it that, she caught the edge of her snowboard and she wiped out. And she watched the Swiss snowboarder fly right past her to take on the gold. She didn't lose because she lacked the skill. She lost because she lost her focus. She got overconfident, and there's nothing more heartbreaking than watching an athlete do all of the hard work only to be disqualified with a moment of momentary lack of discipline. I was watching the World Baseball Classic last night, and the Japanese team is up 5-4 in the sixth inning. And, you know, the Japanese have one of the best teams in the world. We actually call this the World Series because the world plays it. And they're playing Venezuela, and in the sixth inning, the reliever, Japan has one of the best, relievers in the world. They give up a home run, 3-run home run. It was just like this huge turning point in the game. Now Venezuela is going on to the semis, and Japan is going home. But it's heartbreaking to see when somebody spends all this time and this effort to get to this one moment, and a lack of discipline or a momentary lapse in judgment or showing off for the cameras even gets you disqualified. As we get to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, the Apostle Paul has a similar fear. But he's not talking about snowboarding, because we all know that Paul would have been a skier. But, come on. And he's not talking about a gold medal prize, but he does mention training and some kind of Olympic vibe he's talking about. But he's talking about his integrity, his ministry integrity. And this last verse of chapter 9, if you jump up there, it's almost jarring to hear Paul, the hero of the faith, someone who wrote most of our New Testament, admit that he is still training rigorously so that he won't be disqualified. And he's not talking about being disqualified from salvation. This is not a salvation passage or an issue. What he's talking about is losing his integrity in the things that he has built in his ministry, the way that he has conducted himself as a follower of Jesus. He compared himself to an Olympic athlete. He says these are games that if you cut corners or you cheat the rules or you get too comfortable or you show off a bit here, you'll be disqualified. Paul is saying that if I preach sacrifice to the church, and then I live with indulgence, what message does that really teach? If I tell you to follow Christ while I'm following my own appetite, then I would be labeled as a fraud. I would be, his word, disqualified. And we've all seen the wreckage when a pastor or a leader or someone's life work is erased, or maybe you call it canceled because of a lack of discipline or a momentary lapse in judgment, or maybe a hidden sin or something that they have tried to keep behind closed doors when it gets found out. So Paul's being brutally honest here. He knows that he's prone to wander. He knows that the enemy loves nothing more than to see someone who stands in front of people and go, follow me as I follow Christ, and watch that person fall flat on their face. See, Paul knows his weaknesses. Paul knows his human nature. And most importantly, as we're going to see in these first 13 verses of chapter 10, Paul knows his history. Look at verse 1 of chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. He says this to the church in Corinth. Now, I do not want you to be unaware. The same word you get our word agnostic is unaware. I don't want you to be unknowing. Brothers and sisters, our ancestors were all under the cloud. They all passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food. They all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. And so he starts this chapter on a pastoral note. He says, I don't want you to be unaware. I don't want you to be unknowing, because it's very possible that as people continue to come into the Corinthian church, these new Christians without a Jewish background, that they wouldn't know the history of Israel. And so he lists their accolades. All of the ancestors of the faith went through the proper motions. He lists their resume here. They were all under the same cloud, as God provided a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night to protect them in the wilderness. They all passed through the sea. Exodus chapter 14, when God delivered them from Pharaoh through the Red Sea. They were all baptized into Moses. That's not to say they were literally baptized in the name of Moses, but just as we're baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, that is a sign of submission to the authority above us that is God. They were all submitted to the authority of Moses, who was following God. It even says in the Old Testament that they followed God as Moses, they followed Moses as Moses followed the Lord. They all ate and drank the same spiritual food when the water came from the rock that the Lord had provided and the manna came down from heaven. And then in that last verse, Paul ties that all together and he says, this is all actually from Christ. The provision and salvation and deliverance, that it's all from Christ. He was the rock that they drank from. He was the manna that came from heaven. But as he lists off Israel's stacked resume, it reminds me of how Paul listed his resume. When he wrote to the Philippian church, he's like, well, I've got a little bit of some trophies on my wall as well. He says it this way, that he was circumcised on the 8th day, a member of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, I'm blameless. There was no better resume for someone to claim if they wanted to say they were a child of God. There was no better resume than to be an Israelite, and there was no better Israelite resume than Paul. We might say that today that it's people who grew up in the church, born in a pew, which I think is a gross way to be born, but strange thing to say. But maybe that's you. Maybe that's me. If the doors were open to the church, we were probably there. We probably unlocked the doors and locked them after the service. They went to all the VBSs and knew all the songs. They went to church camp, made a profession of faith, were baptized, took communion every single week. They even did the most holy things like change diapers in the nursery. Like really holy people. We're talking about resumes. They did all of the things. But the tone changes for Paul in verse 5 when he uses this word, nevertheless. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them. You can kind of see the wordplay where he says they all had this resume. They were all baptized into Moses. They were all under the cloud. They were all through the sea. But God was not pleased with most of them, regardless of their birthright, regardless of their trophies on the wall, regardless of their knowledge of the Bible, their church attendance. They all fell short of the line. Actually, in verse 5, it's a little more brutal than that. The verse there actually says they were struck down in the wilderness. Struck down is a word in the Greek that is you would say it this way, you'd say katastromeni. And maybe if you listen and I would say it correctly, you would hear the word catastrophe in there. That's where we get our word for catastrophe. It's like the aftermath of a storm. There were bodies everywhere. Don't think that they just all kind of like laid down and died of old age. Think of the song, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, right? This is what happened in the wilderness. This is how seriously God has taken this. To say that God was not pleased with them is an understatement. So what do we do with this? I mean, if this was the end of the teaching this morning, if this was it, like but God was not pleased with most of them, this seems pretty daunting. Do we just throw out all of the things that we do? Do we throw out all the accolades? Do we throw out baptism, communion? Should we stop trying to raise our kids in the church? Of course not. But if we keep reading, we start to see that Paul's most important point is not you're doomed no matter what you do, but instead he's offering a vital warning about the reach of temptation. And the temptation doesn't play favorites. It's equal opportunity. Look what he says in verse 6. Verse 6, it says, now these things took place as an example for us, so that we will not desire evil things as they did. The core warning of this passage is not salvation, but avoiding temptation. because Paul is aware, and from personal experience, he knows that temptation wants to turn your resume into wreckage. He wants to turn your celebrations into catastrophes. To those of you with a holy resume, maybe even walking with the Lord for a really long time, the devil wants to destroy that. For those of you fresh out of an addiction, your blue chip still has the shiny gold lettering on it. The devil wants to pull you back down into that addiction. To those of you barely hanging on, trying to just walk a step at a time with Jesus, the devil wants to trip you. For those of you who feel like you're soaring high with the Lord, the devil wants to bring you down. The enemy wants to ruin you. No matter if your progress in your faith, no matter what it is, 30 years, 30 days, 30 hours, 30 seconds, whatever progress you've made, the enemy will pull you down if you're one step away from the heavens or just 2 feet off the ground. And that's why the warnings come all throughout this passage. Verse 1, Paul says, I don't want you to miss this. Verse 6, he says, pay attention to these examples. Verse 11, he says, these examples are meant as a warning for us. And you see, he wants us to pay attention to this. And the ultimate warning comes in verse 12. If you jump down there now, he says, if you think you are standing, watch out that you don't fall. Watch out that you don't fall. I heard one preacher say it this way, be ye humble, lest you stumble. If you think you're standing firm, be careful, because you have a great resume. See, Israel had these warnings as he starts to go through their most impressive resume, and they still fell for the traps. He's going to give us these examples in the next 4 verses. Israel went cycles with God, and they went 12 rounds with God, and most of them were disqualified. We know that only 2 from the wilderness make it into the promised land. And even Moses himself is disqualified and disqualifies himself from entering in. So how can we avoid the same temptations that they fell into? Well, Paul's going to reveal in the next 4 verses, I think, 4 traps that Israel fell for. And just to make it a little more memorable, I made them start with a letter T-R-A-P, so trap. So you can write it in your notes. We just remember these traps. So chapter 10, verse 7, here's what he says. First trap, don't become idolaters as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and they got up to party. The first trap Israel fell into was the trap of tolerating idolatry. Tolerating idolatry. They're breaking the first and the second, and along with quite a few other commandments. Idolatry is simply this: putting anything that's good, bad, or neutral in the place of God in your life. At the highest point in your life, what is there? What's sitting on the throne of your life? We like to think of Israel, and we think of idols on altars. We think of temples to false gods. You may even think of like voodoo dolls and people dancing around, fires half naked and, chanting to the gods and worshiping the sun or the moon, which that makes us feel better about ourselves because we're like, we don't worship idols. We don't have graven images. We've never made a golden calf. That makes us feel good, but the trap of idolatry is alive and well in our modern world. I love how Tim Keller wrote it in his book, Counterfeit Gods. He said, the true God of your heart. You want to reveal your idols? Here's the test. What your thoughts effortlessly go to when there is nothing else demanding your attention. When there's nothing else demanding your attention. We can see that Paul's description of Israel, what he's quoting here, this little verse, when he says they sat down to eat and drink, and then they got up to eat, and then they went to party. Exodus chapter 32. It's a well-known story. Moses is on the top of a fiery mountain getting the law of Moses that he's going to bring down a couple of times. As he's up there, the people of God get tired, and they get tired of waiting. They sat down to eat and drink, and they got up to party. When they took their eyes off of the mountain of God, their worship lost its focus. They sat down to eat. They probably ate too much. They sat down to drink. They probably drank too much, and they got up to party, and the party was all centered around the golden calf that they had made the night before. Their attention quickly turns to something else. So when something else is demanding our attention, when nothing else is demanding your attention, when you have no distractions in your life, which I know is crazy to think about, but if you just got to sit in a room with your own thoughts, where does your mind go? These often look like good things. These are things that take our mind off of God, but our modern idols kind of dress themselves up as good things, distractions that feel good. Culture wars that confirm our biases. Yeah, that's something I need to pursue. I need to be all about that. A wall full of degrees that shows how smart I am. a bank account that's full of money, a stock portfolio that's always up and to the right, whatever side of the aisle you're sitting on, what captures your attention, what gets your affection, what calls to you, like the snake would say in the garden to Eve. Did God really say? Is God really all that important to be on the throne of your life? Is God really, that fiery mountain up there, like, is that really worth focusing on? Come down here to something more shiny. It's about avoiding temptations that take your eyes off the mountain of God, keeping focused in a world that is built to distract us from the Father. It's built to keep us moving so that we don't see the most important thing. So the warning here is clear. If you are not fighting idolatry, you are feeding it. If you're not fighting idolatry, you are feeding it. Or as the Puritan theologian John Owen said, be killing sin or it will be killing you. Be killing sin or it will be killing you. This warning against idolatry, to not tolerate things that take your attention and your focus off of the mountain of God. Look at verse 8, on to the next. Let us not commit sexual immorality as some of them did. And in a single day, 23,000 people died. Now, this is a wild story. I'm not going to recommend this for bedtime tonight for the kids, but it's in Numbers chapter 25. You might want to, it's not in the children's Bibles. I know that. This is a story of the Israelites. The Israelites are, they're camped out among other nations and other tribes. And the Israelite men started sleeping with the Moabite women, which led to the Moabite women saying, hey, why don't you come to church with me? That's how it usually works, flirt to convert, right? So they were doing that, and which led them straight to the altar of Baal, right? He shows up quite a few times in the Bible, false god Baal of Peor. And so God causes a plague to break out on Israel as a punishment for worshiping another god. It's like rule number 1, okay? Don't do that. And they did it. And so while this plague breaks out and people start dying, nearly 1,000 are already dead, while the camp is literally weeping in repentance over this. They're having funerals for people that are just dying of this plague left and right. While this is happening, there's a man named Zamiri who brings his Midianite girlfriend through the camp. He's like walking through the halls of high school, arm in hand. It's like, anybody got a problem with this? Brazenly brings his Midianite woman into the camp, into his tent. They shut the flap or the door or what, I don't know, but and so on and so forth. Talk about not reading the room, right? Like there's a funeral going on and you're like, hey, is this a problem? Like, you guys mind if I invite my Midianite? She's not Moabite, she's Midianite. It's the same sin. He's brazenly walking in front. So then there's this enraged priest named Phineas and his stepbrother Ferb. I'm just making sure you're paying attention. I think it's pronounced Phineas, but I love that it's just Phineas. I can just see his head. But this will kind of change your mind. That'll take the cartoon out of it. Here's what Phineas does. He grabs a spear, and let's just say he permanently ends the activities inside of the tent, okay? Maybe permanently joins them together, if you will. It's a crazy story. Like you can read it later on your own, but by the end of the plague and the end of the funeral, more than 24,000 people are left dead. Second trap that Israel is ensnared in. Rationalizing immorality, parading their sin in front of one another, saying, who's going to call me out? Who's going to, not like somebody's going to bring a spear out. These Israelite men were so driven by their lust and their desires that even after seeing thousands fall, they have already detailed. They've already seen. They was like, we're going right back to the same well. We're going right back. We're bringing the same sin back into the camp. And we already have a detailed view of how sexually broken Corinth was. It was kind of a way that you could describe someone. To Corinthianize someone was a way that you could say, man, they're wild, they're brazen. They don't care about what you think about them or what they're doing. But do you ever catch yourself thinking when you read texts like this, you're just like, well, yeah, that's like Israel way back in the day. Like, how hard is it to avoid temptation in Israel? It's just like, don't leave your tent, right? Like, it's hot out there anyway. Like, don't leave your tent. Don't go to the other tribe and bring other people into your tribe. Like, that seems easy. Even in the first century, like, temptation and sin is something you needed to walk to. Like, you walk to a red light district, or you walk to a brothel or a bathhouse or a temple that scratched whatever itch that you had in Corinth. But today, we tend to think, like, that's not really, like, Paul can't fully understand. He can't fully understand our world, what it's like to have an algorithm that tracks you down and pursues you, what it's like to have temptation on a smartphone that lives in your pocket. Today, temptation is a click away or tap to pay, and we live in a culture of immorality on demand. We can read a verse like the enemy prowls around like a roaring lion, and we go, yeah, I know what that feels like, the pressure that it's like everywhere. We're bombarded by it on every screen. It's so easy to just throw up your hands and go, well, that's just a sign of the times. You can't get away from it. You might as well just rationalize it. It's just part of who we are now. You can't beat them, join them, right? But it's not that. It's actually a trap. It's a trap that convinces you that your own desires are the only thing that matters. That when you say things like, I have needs, or I'm just a man, like that is actually, you can get yourself into pornography, infidelity, promiscuity, and that these are all victimless crimes. It's just because we're just human. We're all just out here being human. We can't judge each other for it. And I'm not advocating for anyone to bring spears into these situations. But what Paul does here, as he says in chapter 6, verse 18, flee from sexual immorality. He's using this very extreme story to remind us that if you are not running from immorality, that you are asking for it to catch you. If you've ever played hide and seek with little kids, you know that you could probably find a pretty good hiding place and take a nice little nap and they will never find you, right? There are places that you know that you could go to get away from to play the game well from the little kids, right? Well, what do we do when we play hide and seek with little kids? You're sitting in the closet and it's getting kind of hot, you're getting kind of tired, you want to move on, you make some kind of noise, or you like throw something down the hallway, or like, I'm over here, right? To get them a little closer. That's the game we play with temptation. It's like, I know that I could run and hide from this temptation. I know that I can get away from it, and I've been commanded to, and I know that I should, and I know the feeling, and I know when, where, why. I know I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and I need to get away from these things. I need a snack, I need a nap, I need something like that, but I'm going to make a little bit of noise just to see if the temptation will come a little closer. Just to see, well, what if I don't fully get away? What if I run maybe 3/4 speed or like half speed and see if the temptation really, really wants me? It does. To be honest, we're looking at Israel here, and for Israel, it probably was just physically running, fleeing in the opposite direction. Today, for us, it looks more like guardrails and internet filters and canceled subscriptions and being honest with that relationship at work that's gotten a little too flirty. Repenting of a cheating lifestyle, or getting help with your pornography addiction. If you're not running from it, you're asking to be caught, and it's faster than you, I promise. Verse 9 gets us to trap number 3. Verse 9 says, let us not test Christ as some of them did and were destroyed by snakes. Now some of you this could be the only Bible verse you need for me to talk you into anything. Snakes, right? Don't do that, or snakes. And you're like, okay, not a problem. Like, Lord, you got my attention. I will walk away from this temptation because you said snakes. This actually comes from Numbers chapter 21, another kind of wild story. They come out of Egypt. I mean, they just get released from slavery in Egypt. And it does not take them very long before they're already kind of grumbling about it. They get hungry. They get tired. And they start to look back towards Egypt and they go, man, did God bring us all the way out here just so we would die outside of Egypt? At least we got some food in Egypt. At least we had work to keep our back strong. Like, we were just going to come out of the wilderness and die. I love Psalm chapter 78, where it's essentially the song version of Numbers 21, where Asaph writes, he says, they tested God in their hearts by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, can God spread a table in the wilderness? Is this even possible for God to do this? Yeah, he brought us out of slavery, but now it looks like he's got no plan. Hey, Moses, what's the plan here? What's God telling you, Moses? Did you really just hoodwink all of us? And now we're in the wilderness and we're going to die? We should turn back. Third trap that Israel falls for, it trips them up. It's abusing grace. Abusing the grace of Christ. Abusing God's faithfulness and grace. It's the toddler in the backseat of the car when you turn around and you say, you have 5 seconds to stop screaming, and they scream for 4.999 seconds. Paul is warning us, don't test the grace of God, not because it's limitless, but because the limits show something about your heart. In chapter 8, we saw this play out when we start asking questions. Is it okay for a Christian to? How far is too far? Is this technically a sin? Does the Bible forbid this and that? Those questions usually come with some sort of underlying indication of a weakness that we have. We said that a couple weeks ago. It's usually because I actually want to do it. I want to do this, so I need to find the justification for it. Here's the thing. If you're asking how close you can get to the edge without falling, you've stopped chasing the Savior and you've started flirting with the fall. The question isn't how close can I get, but how close can I stay to Jesus? Ask yourself this question. Am I asking God for guidance, or am I just testing his patience? Here's a great question. Write this in your notes. Am I trusting how far I can go with God, or am I testing how far God will go with me? There's a distinction there. There's a very different way to look at what am I doing? Am I just seeing, God, will you come with me if I take another step? Instead of saying, how far can I go if I stay super close to you, God? See, we abuse the grace of Christ when we are only interested in the limits. The final trap that entangles Israel, the fourth trap in verse 10, is protesting the process. Protesting the process. They were complainers. Paul says, verse 10, don't grumble as some of them did. And they were killed by the destroyer. That phrase, the destroyer there, is the same as the angel of death from the Passover. So this is how seriously God takes complaining and grumbling. Numbers chapter 18, a leader named Korah leads a rebellion against Moses and the leaders of Israel. Long story short, God proves you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. He sends the destroyer to destroy them, the angel of death. And that seems like a brutal way to go out. That seems like the most severe punishment of the four that we've read. And I'm looking at this text and being like, for what? For complaining? I look at our modern world. Complaining is like that's like our modern pastime, right? Like that's what we do. Author Anne Lamott writes about complaints. She says, complaints are prayers to the wrong God. But if you look at our world now, we complain a lot. We love complaints, and complaints are also our most contagious temptation, aren't they? Like if you're around someone who complains a lot, it kind of rubs off on you, and you want to complain with them, right? Because who wants to be the positive person in the room, right? You're like, no, we're going to complain together. There's a Cambridge study in 2024 that said Facebook users write 98% more posts about negative articles than positive ones. This isn't you guys. This is 98% of other people, right? It's not you guys. 98% more posts about negative articles than positive ones. And this, it also found we're twice as likely to share what makes us mad than what makes us happy. And that's not just online. That's true in real life. Have you ever been part of a small group that kind of goes sideways and kind of feels like a Facebook comment section? Have you ever been a part of just people grabbing lunch to spread all the gossip and complain about all the things, whether it's work or whether it's church or whatever it is? It's not just online. You ever been to a busy restaurant after church? The complaints, just the kind of grouchiness and all over. You just go online today and look at any post that's made. Maybe there's a post today that you'll see on Facebook about, like hero of the neighborhood saves a puppy from drowning in a backyard pool. The first comment I guarantee would be like, who would still have their pool open this time of year? Wouldn't they? It'd be like, they wouldn't do that for a cat. Yeah, exactly. It's a cat. So, but you will find, it won't be like that. You'll be a couple likes and a couple hearts, but the people that are commenting and the people that are sharing, it's usually 98% of the time, it's going to be like, I can't believe that's what our tax dollars are going for. Saving dogs from pools. Like, what's next, right? We like to complain. So Paul's warning here for the church is like, don't lose your credibility. It's hard to convince a world that God is good if your face and your comments and your conversations don't feel like it or look like it. Here's how Paul wrote it to the Philippian church. He says, do everything without complaining or arguing. I used to hate this verse because it was always read to me when I was complaining and arguing. So why not complain and argue? Then you will be pure and without blame. You will be children of God without a fault among sinful and evil people. Not to judge, not to say I'm better than you, not to say I don't complain, but But this is why. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. If you've ever been in a room full of complainers and somebody in there is not, and they bring the positive spin, you're just like, well, that feels good. Well, that feels good. Why didn't I bring that up? Why can't I see the shiny side or the bright side of things? Why can't I see the faithfulness of God in this? Israel has this impressive resume, but they fall for all of these traps. They fall for every one of them. It's just 4 verses, just rapid fire. A history lesson is a helpful reminder that even if you feel like you're standing firm, be ye humble, lest ye stumble. Watch out, because you're not immune to falling. Your resume will not hold you up. All of your preparation, all of your work. But before Paul closes, because this kind of lands on like ooh, that feels bad. Like this feels kind of daunting. What could we possibly do? Is there any grace in this? Is there any good news? Before Paul closes his thought, he writes a couple of clues that will help us out. It's like, how do you fight off these traps? How do you make sure these traps don't ensnare you? Look at what he says, chapter 10, verse 13. The first part of this says, no temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity. When you read that, at first light, it kind of seems insulting. It kind of seems like Paul is going like, grow up, kid, right? Like nobody wants to hear when they're going through trials, when they're going through temptation, for them to be like, oh yeah, I've been through that. You get a little more like the author of Hebrews wrote, none of you have been tempted or persecuted to the point of shedding blood yet. And you can read that and just be like, hey, are you trying to downgrade my struggle? Are you trying to say that I'm not really struggling? Are you trying to say that when I share with you that I'm really, really hurting, for you to just go, well, that's pretty common at your age to feel lonely. It's pretty common at your age to be tempted. It's pretty common at your age to feel desperate or left out or without purpose. This is what Paul is saying, but we don't take it as an insult. He's actually rallying the church. He's reminding you that the whole point of this is that we're in this together. There's a reason we strive for a multi-generational church, is because we know that people have been through some stuff. And people that have been through some stuff can look back at your stuff and go, I've been through some stuff. You're going to make it. You're going to be okay. You've seen the nature shows where the lions chase the herds of gazelles across the wilderness, right? And what do lions do? It's not like each lion goes, all right, I got the fat one, I got the skinny one, they don't just pick out and go chase on their own, right? No, they swarm the herd and they run around the herd until the herd gets tired, or one of the gazelle goes off trace by itself. And then what happens? You see every single lion. I don't know if they have like some kind of lion speak or whatever, every single lion stops chasing the herd and goes after the one. And they surround this lion, this gazelle doesn't stand a chance, just waiting for one to fall behind. They can't take down the whole herd, so they isolate one. That's how the enemy works. The Bible describes the enemy as a lion that's prowling around, looking for someone to devour. The enemy can't stand up to the church. The Bible promises us the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church, but it can isolate you. He can convince you that you're the only one struggling, that this is just your cross to bear and you're just going to have to deal with it. To convince you that no one else will understand if you bring up that sin or that transgression or that temptation. If you even speak what you're struggling with, everyone will turn away from you and you will be by yourself, which is exactly where he wants you to be. They will convince you, your temptation will convince you that you're already disqualified. I'm not fast enough to run with the horses. I'm not a super spiritual person. I don't have a very good resume. I can't go with the holy of the holies, so I'm going to get left behind. I might as well pull out myself. Paul is warning us this. The moment we believe that our struggle is unique, we become prey. That's when the enemy goes, got one. I got one. They peeled back from the herd. They're alone. Let's keep them that way. Paul rallies the tempted church. He calls the church. You are not alone, he says. He says, you are not disqualified yet. If you're hearing the words of the Lord today in this place or online, if you're hearing these words, that means you have not shut your ears or you have not hardened your heart to the point where you can't receive the grace of Christ. The enemy has not won. You are not alone. Finally, Paul ends with this promise. Look what he says in the second part of verse 13. God is faithful Underline that in your Bible. God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But when temptation, He will also provide the way out so you may be able to bear it. Now, you've probably heard this verse, and a lot of people focus on the first part of that second part of the verse, right? And we wrongfully translate this from time to time as, God won't give you more than you can handle. You've heard that before, right? God won't give you more than you can handle. And we know that that's wrongly translated because that's just inconsistent with how God works throughout the Bible, right? How many times has He given someone more than they can handle? He told Paul himself, I'm not taking away that thorn in your side because my grace is sufficient for you. So remember, Paul's talking about escaping temptation here. He's not talking about escaping life's pain or suffering, because there are clearly times when we get handed more than we can handle. He's not addressing the havoc that sin has caused in our world. He's not addressing death and disease and cancer and loss and grief. And so if I could just insert a little pastoral note here, can we please stop using this verse to comfort someone who's just gotten the worst news they've ever received in their life? Well, they say God won't give you more than you can handle. She gets it. When someone's literally sitting in the middle of something they cannot handle, that's the last thing that the grace of God wants them to hear. Maybe if you're looking for a verse to share, head over to 2 Corinthians. Paul writes a much more flowery, much more comforting 2 Corinthians chapter 1, as he calls God the God of all comfort, and we're comforted so that we can comfort others in our affliction. The context here is temptation. The message is clear. God has not left you helpless in your battle with temptation. God has not left you alone. Whether it's the church that He surrounds you with or the faithfulness that He has been there before and He will be there again. One last Greek word in that last verse there I want to point our attention to. It's the Greek word for way out. Ekbasis. Ekbasis is the word. The Greek word for way out. Paul uses it only one time here. A way out. It's a very short, little punchy word, but it carries a deep imagery. I want you to imagine an army that is stranded on the side of a mountain. They can't go left, they can't go right, they can't go up, they can't go down, but the enemy has surrounded them. And the slings and the arrows are coming, and ekbasis, or the way out, is a mountain pass through like a narrow or a rugged, some sort of escape that they've been offered. It's like they turn around and they go, oh, there's a door here. There's sunlight on the other side of this tunnel. There's a way that we can go. We're not going to be able to fight through our enemies' temptations and the slings and the arrows and everything that they're bringing at us, but we can go this way. Lord of the Rings fans will think of being on the side of the mountain going into the mines of Moria. The fellowship is encapsulated, everything around them. They're getting ready to be defeated. But they know that they can go into the mountain. Now, are the mines of Moria a safe place? They're not really sure. They don't know if there's anything down there. Spoiler alert, big things down there, big bad things down there. But to escape their current danger, werewolves, a sea creature, all of that sort of stuff, they duck into the mountains. This is the image that Paul wants you to think of when he says that God provides a way out. That there is an ekbasis, there is hope in our battle with temptation. But the hope doesn't rest in our resume and how hard we can fight or how far up you can pull your bootstraps, or it doesn't rest on your own strength. It rests in the faithfulness of God. God is faithful, and He will provide a way out. He will provide an ekbasis. There is a way. Is it hard to walk over? Is it going to take a lot of grit? Is it going to take a lot of, like really hard to get away from temptation sometimes? Absolutely. But He has provided a way out. Now that's the hope. The hope is that the way out is there. In our battle with temptation, God will provide a way out. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. When you see the way out, you have to take the way out. I mean, how often do we see the way out, but we blind ourselves to it, or we mute the phone when that phone call comes in just at the right time, or we feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit to turn that show or that TV off, but we still don't do it. We numb that with something else. Often we're given a way out, but we refuse to take it. The right person shows up at the right time. The text message or the direct message comes through at the right time. Or maybe it's more painful than that. Maybe it's more than that. It's not just like, hey, God gives me this clear path out of here, and it's very obvious. Sometimes it seems like a harder way. Maybe it's a more painful path that God provides, like someone sees your internet search history. You get caught in your choices, and you have a choice to repent or to tell more lies. How many times has God provided a way out, but we choose to stay trapped in our pride and our idolatry and our lust? We choose to stay close to the edge instead of running close to Jesus. And so this morning, I want us to consider the way out. The way out. This is the warning that Paul is giving the Corinthian church. Like, God will provide you a way out, but I want you to see the traps that way more qualified people before you have fallen for. Can we stop playing games with our sin and pretending that we're hopeless or helpless and that temptation is just a way of life and just the way the world is now? Our prayer team is going to come down on the wings, and they'll be here to pray with you this morning. I'm going to be out in Decision Point, ready to pray, to talk about your next steps towards Jesus. And I want us to consider these questions together. I want us to consider this. What would it look like for you to take a way out? What would it look like for you to take the way out, even if it's going to cause more pain in the immediate, but there's grace on the other side of keeping your integrity intact? What would it look like to take the way out? I want you to think right now of the sin that so easily entangles you. Every time you get just a couple steps up the ladder towards Jesus, that Satan just kind of grabs that heel and pulls you down every single time. I want you to think about that sin. What would it look like to rid yourself of it? What would it look like to scale the mountain so quickly that sin is just like, where did he go? Where did he go? He's no longer tempted by that. What would it look like to find your way out? And lastly, overall question, what would it look like to live free? What does it look like to not have to look over your shoulder and know that temptation is just right behind because you have run so fast from it that you're so close to Jesus, that's not even a temptation for you anymore. And that the Lord has freed you from that and has brought you into the promised land, not because you deserved it, not because you fought hard enough or ran fast enough, but because He provided the way out. And He gives you the grace to sustain and to continue running. What would it look like to live free? Let's consider that together, church.